Hey, thanks for joining me today for our weekly devotional from Greenwood Baptist Church. I'm Justin Allison, and I am the discipleship pastor here. And I just want to say thank you so much because several people have reached out and said some kind things to me about these videos. So I appreciate that. I want you to know. Today we're going to be in Daniel chapter 9. And so as we look today at Daniel chapter 9, I want to let you know that some of what I'll be talking about comes from this book by Warren Wiersbe. It's one of his commentaries in the B series of commentaries. This one's called Be Resolute. It's a commentary on Daniel. And it's a really simple book from the aspect of the language is not too hard to understand. It's not a simple book in the sense that it's basic or not worthwhile. It certainly is. But I want you to know that's one that I've looked at in detail to prepare for this because some of the observations that we'll be talking about in chapter 9 are not super obvious. And so I want to be honest with you about how you might come to make those same observations, okay? So, starting in Daniel chapter 9, we see that it was the first year of the reign of Darius the Mede. And so this is one who has already, we've read about his being deposed. So this is stepping back a little bit in time. And he says that he learned, in verse 2, from reading the word of the Lord as revealed to Jeremiah the prophet, that Jerusalem might lie desolate for 70 years. And he turned to the Lord God and pleaded with him in prayer and fasting. And I also wore rough burlap and sprinkled myself with ashes. And so then we read from verse 4 and following down through about verse 20, Daniel's prayer. And in this prayer, he confesses on behalf of the people. He asks for God to cleanse them. And it actually reads a lot like a psalm in the book of Psalms. And so in this, he models that idea of confession and repentance and asking the Lord for forgiveness. And he appeals finally at the end in verse 19 to the Lord and says, "O Lord, hear. O Lord, forgive. O Lord, listen and act. For your own sake, do not delay, O my God, for your people and your city bear your name." So his appeal is to God alone, not necessarily that God would take care of his people, but that God's name not be desecrated by the destruction of his people. And so then Gabriel, the angel, comes on the scene, and he tells him that at the moment you began praying, Daniel, that things set in motion. And so then he says, here is what that word in Jeremiah means. So it's an interpretation of the 70 from from Jeremiah's prophecy. And so verse 24, a period of 70 sets of 7 has been decreed for your people and your holy city to finish their rebellion, to put an end to their sin, to atone for their guilt, to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to confirm the prophetic vision, and to anoint the most holy place. So let's count those clauses there. Finish rebellion, end their sin, atone for their guilt, bring in everlasting righteousness, confirm the prophetic vision, and anoint the holy place. So that's 6 clauses. And so that's important in the observation that I'm going to make in a minute. So he says, now listen, this is verse 25. Now listen and understand, 7 sets of 7 plus 62 sets of 7 will pass from the time the command is given to rebuild Jerusalem until a ruler, the anointed one, comes. Jerusalem will be rebuilt with streets and strong defenses despite the perilous times. And then he goes on and he says, after this period of 62 sets of 7, the anointed one will be killed, and appearing to have accomplished nothing, and a ruler will arise whose armies will destroy the city and the temple. The end will come with a flood, and war and its miseries are decreed from that time to the very end. And he says the ruler, this is not the anointed one, but the ruler will make a treaty with the people for a period of one set of 7, but after half this time he will put an end to the sacrifices and offerings, and as a climax to all his terrible deeds, he will set up a sacrilegious object that causes desecration, until the fate decreed for this defiler is finally poured out on him. And I'll be honest, Christian interpretations of this vision have varied over the last, Christian ones in the last 2,000 years, Jewish ones even before that. And so what I'm going to suggest today is an interpretation of this that I think is, yes, it's a little broad, but I think it's able to avoid some of the pitfalls of specific identification. Here's what I mean. Some people wanted to see this unholy ruler, this ruler who brings an end to sacrifices and offerings, as something that happened in BC, before Christ, 167, with Antiochus, who desecrated the temple by sacrificing a pig on the altar. And while that might seem to line up in a few of these ways, it's obvious that what happened there and the defeat of Antiochus IV, Antiochus Epiphanes, that never ushered in, this new era of spiritual rebirth. Okay, and so I think it's good for us to avoid pinning all of that on a specific figure, just personally. And you can disagree with me on that. Broadly, Christians agree that one day Jesus is going to bring about the end. And that's what I want to suggest mainly here today. And so this period of 70 sets of 7, we talked about those 6 clauses. And so this first period that's mentioned in verse 25, he says, 7 sets of 7 plus 62 sets of 7 will pass from the time of this command. He gives all these things. So the first one is a set of 7, a 49-year period, which is likely one of the decrees for the people to go back to Jerusalem. There were a few of these decrees, so it's hard to know which one. I like Wiersbe's suggestion of the decree for Nehemiah to go to Jerusalem, because then, if that's the case, the math works out pretty well that this next set of 7, which is 434 years, as we're told in verse 26, this 62 sets of 7, that number works out to be roughly AD 30, right about the time that most of us would think Christ was crucified. And so at that time, it says, the anointed one will be killed, appearing to have accomplished nothing. So that lines up with the Christian idea of Christ being crucified. And then it talks about some things that will happen after that. And so the third period of 7 years would be this time that the Antichrist comes, and that's dependent on text and Revelation. And so this Antichrist will come and make a covenant with the Israelite people to rebuild the Jewish city and temple and invoke sacrifices, and then after a while put an end to that and set up a sacrilegious sacrifice and offering, and he'll set up these horrible things until the fate decreed for this defiler is finally poured out on him. And so there is a coming day of victory that it's obvious Daniel is not going to live to see. And so we can make a few observations about the text that are relevant for us in the 21st century. First of all, that this is a difficult vision to understand. I think we could all agree with that. The second one would be that God is in control of human history and has a plan, and we can take comfort in that. As far back as the time of Daniel, in the 500s BC. It was definitely before 538 when this vision came, because there was a different king on the throne at that point. But definitely before 538, the Lord had revealed to Daniel what would happen in history in the far-off future. And as we think about that, first of all, that's an incredible miracle. And second of all, that should give us comfort that God knows, God sees a long time out in the future, and He knows what's coming. He knows what's best for his people, and he knows how to care for us in those things. And he controls what's going to happen over those times. And so we can trust that even when things seem to be getting worse and worse in our own lives, that perhaps that time of God defeating evil is just simply further off in the future than our own lifetime, as it was for Daniel. And the second thing about God having revealed this beforehand is, I think that we can see that it's things are going to get worse before they get better, and that looking at the world that we live in and thinking things are getting worse and worse may ultimately point to things getting better at some point in the future. And by things getting better, I mean that the final defeat of evil is guaranteed to happen. And so if we see things getting worse and worse and worse, that could actually be a way of taking comfort in the fact that God's in control by saying, ooh, maybe it's going to get worse, and maybe this is going to be the time when God finally puts an end to all of the evil in this world. And so those are a few ways that we can interpret that. Ultimately, in history, the Jewish people kind of had some ups and downs, and the temple was destroyed in AD 70, has not been rebuilt since then. And so a lot of Jewish people are still looking forward for that to happen. A lot of Christian people are looking forward for that to happen because of this text as well. And so we can take comfort that God's in control of history. God's in control of history in the future and the past. And I think we can realize that it's okay if things around us seem to be getting worse, because God's told us that's okay. Well, I hope that's helpful and comforting to you. And I understand it's probably not all the details that you want, but it should be noted that this is an old prophecy about times that seem to be future from even where we're at 2,500 years later. So take that with however you will. But I hope that's been helpful, and I hope to talk to you more about these things in the future. You can email me, jallison@greenwoodbc.com, or you can come talk to me one day in between our worship services on a Sunday at the information desk. I'll see you around later.